Hi, everyone. This is Karen BK Chan, and today we are going to do a lunchtime session on rejection resilience. So tune in and we'll start in a few minutes, and I'll be right back. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about rejection resilience. How do you become more resilient in the face of rejection and other kinds of emotional pain? And we'll get started in a couple of minutes. So we'll just let people arrive. You get yourself a beverage, maybe, and then we'll get there. Here's my beverage. And feel free to send comments. I can read them and let me know who you are, where you're from, if you'd like. Not required, but I'd love to know who I'm talking to. And also, if you have questions at any time, just throw them in the comments. I would love to answer them and or throw them to the group for other people also to answer them. Okay, I think we'll get started, and maybe other folks will join us. Feel free to throw in the comments what your interests are, what brings you to the talk today. If you have already questions, feel free to throw them up anytime. Okay, so in the next 30 to 45 minutes, I'm going to go through some of the work I do around rejection. I came to this work because I talk about consent a lot. And high schools, universities, all kinds of organizations are asking many educators to talk about sexual consent and how to do sexual consent well and properly. And at the same time, every time that you are following the encouragement to ask first, to articulate or to communicate about rejection, about consent, you're opening yourself up to the possibilities of rejection. So every time we ask a question, seeking consent, we are possibly exposed to this feeling. And at the same time, it's a very common cultural understanding that some people, quote unquote, can't do rejection or don't do it well. So how do we reconcile these two ideas? Can you just be someone who doesn't do rejection or doesn't take it well? And then where is room for you to do consent? The truth is, rejection is pain, is emotional pain, and nobody likes rejection. That's the universal thing. And a lot like other kinds of pain, rejection is processed in the brain in a similar way. So much like if you break your ankle, it goes through your brain and tells you that you're in trouble, things are bad. And so how we take care of a sprained ankle should inform actually how we take care of emotional pain, like rejection. But culturally, a lot of times we don't treat rejection in quite the same way. And people who are going through rejection often don't receive the kind of care that people with broken ankles get. And I guess my interest is in making sure that we both tend to our own broken ankles and our own rejected feelings the same way we might tend to someone else's broken ankles and their hurt feelings. The bottom line of that is that we need to consider the culture of care, self-care included, around rejection. So if you're joining us with a class and as a video form, please pause the video now after and pose this question to the class. The question is, other than asking someone out and being told no, what are other ways that people get rejected romantically and sexually? What are some ways? What are we talking about here when we're talking about rejection? Because it's not only about that moment where you ask somebody out or ask for a phone number. It is much bigger than that. So go ahead and pause the video now if you're joining us as a recording. And if you're staying with me, here are some of the common things that I hear from folks about their experiences of rejection. Everything from a partner who's trying to change the structure of a relationship. So that might mean I need some more space. That might mean the frequency at which we see each other or text each other or talk. I want to change that. It might be someone saying I need to break up. It might be someone saying I want to become exclusive. I want to be monogamous with you. It might be somebody suggesting opening up the relationship to seeing other people after you haven't been seeing other people. Rejection can be experienced also during sexual experience. So it could be somebody suggesting, can we try something? Can we add something to what we do sexually, to our sexual experience? It could be someone saying, I don't like what you just did. People are, this makes a lot of sense that as humans, as we are engaged in something so vulnerable as having sexual experience with each other, that if the person we're doing it with does not receive what we're offering with 100% excitement, Rejection can also be experienced when you ask somebody, it could be a partner or a date or even a friend, to do something that you're really hoping you could do together. So it might be, would you meet my family? Would you go to this party with me? Would you do this scary adventure racing thing with me? It might be, would you meet my friends? Would you be publicly known as an item with me? All those things, when the other person says no or doesn't want exactly what we're asking for, rejection can be experienced. And finally, rejection can also be experienced when somebody doesn't like how we look or what we do, or doesn't find us as impressive as we were hoping we would be. All those things can bring up the feelings of rejection. And of course, systemic injustices, systemic things that discriminate against some of us. So it could be body size, it could be racial, ethnic kinds of makeup. All those things can make us feel rejected. So the feelings of rejection can come from so many places aside from just being told that I don't want to give you my number. I want to tell you a story. So in grade 11, I wrote a poem to a crush that I had, a crush that I had for a couple of years, and it was really scary. And what I was scared of was that it would be inappropriate for me to have a crush on this person. So as a girl, I had a crush on another girl in she was in grade 10, I think. And I was so afraid that she would not only reject me, but make fun of me or tell me that there was something wrong with me. So I wrote her a poem during Valentine's Day. I had a sense that she might reciprocate what I was feeling, but I couldn't be sure. So I signed the poem, "Not Your Average Guy," thinking that was pretty smart, a pretty clever thing. And I thought, if she does have feelings for me too, then she'd pick up on the pun and let me know that she knows. And if she did not have feelings for me, if it never even occurred to her, then she would actually just think it's some guy who thinks he's special. I don't know how that poem landed. It never got back to me. But I was doing that to prevent rejection on so many levels. And that makes sense to me. And at the same time, it makes me think about other things that we do to avoid feeling rejection, avoid confronting it face to face, which I think throughout this presentation you'll see is what I'm going to advocate. I'm going to advocate that you and I confront and experience rejection. That is the way to get through it. Anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. More about this idea of preventing rejection. So to prevent, quote unquote, prevent rejection, a lot of times people might not accept information that says you're being rejected. And especially masculinity teaches many of us that if somebody says no, or not interested, or not quite into it, that your job is to keep going, is just to keep nagging or pushing or pressuring until the person gives in. That is one way of saying, nope, I don't see rejection, nothing here to see. And it's not cool. It is just not, it's not consensual, not consent practice. You're literally ignoring information about a boundary that somebody is giving you. But it's also terrible rejection practice. It's terrible for your own resilience around rejection. So that kind of behavior is a way of, quote unquote, avoiding rejection that ends up in terrible places. And we'll get to talking about the terrible places in a bit. But guilting somebody into something, sulking if somebody is reluctant to do something, and sulking is another way of trying to get someone to do something that they don't want to do. And and some people would call it a passive aggressive way of doing it. Silent treatment as an outcome of somebody rejecting you is also, again, not consensual practice. It is actually, all those things belong in a kind of practice we call coercion. And yet they're very common in relationships and friendships too. Sometimes it's almost taken to be like understood as how we are supposed to behave to get people to do the things we want them to. But please, let's be clear, those things are coercive. And so my question to you, to the class, if you're doing this as a class, is what are other problematic behaviors that people do to avoid rejection? What are other things that people do to try to get people to do things that they don't want to do? So let's name some of the problematic ones, and you can pause the video here. Some of the things that I think of about problematic behaviors that people do include things like, if you love me, then you'll do this. If I'm really as important to you as you say I am, then you would do X, Y, or Z. So that is obviously is associated with a threat, and the threat is or else you're a liar, or else you are not as important to me as you want to be. Another way that another problematic behavior that is quite common is other people do this, other couples are doing this, my friends do this, why wouldn't you? And I guess sometimes the simple answer is because I'm me and I'm not them. But sometimes when you're in the situation with somebody, when you're face to face, and someone brings this up as the excuse or as the coercive tactic, you can feel quite cornered. So other people are doing it too. I mean, that's the classic peer pressure line. Do this or else I'll hurt myself. This is a really serious one, and more common than I think we talk about. So if you don't do something, then I'm going to do something that you'll regret, which is to hurt myself. And it's a very manipulative way of negotiating for power in a situation where you feel like you have no control and you're freaking out, basically. So make no mistake, that is not consent practice. In fact, anything that anyone does because you'll hurt yourself otherwise is something that they're not doing with consent, even if at the end they're like, fine. So we'll talk a little bit about what else you can do when you feel that helpless and that optionless, that you say, if you do that, I'll hurt myself, or if you don't do that, I'll hurt myself. And finally, this is a very common thing in couples, is getting moody or getting into a mood or getting grumpy. Sometimes people might call that passive aggression. And it's basically you're making a very loud and clear statement without saying the statement. And that statement might be, I hate you. I don't love you anymore. You hurt me. You're a terrible person. All those things might be the statement that is behind moodiness. And moodiness is also a coercive tactic, not part of consent. So I spent a little time talking about the ways in which we react because rejection is so hard. Now I want to get into a little bit more about actual resilience. How do you build resilience in the face of this thing that all of us have to go through at some point, if not a lot? One of the most important and favorite tools of mine that I talk about a lot is the learning zone model that I like to combine with something else called the compass of shame model. The learning zone model goes something like this. And it's basically saying all of our life's experiences happen in three ways, in three categories of experience. In the center is the comfort zone. That's the green circle. That means everything is predictable. That means things that are happening in it are easy for me. It might be because it happens every day and I know how it goes. It might be simply that I'm not threatened by anything that might happen. So for some people, that's being by themselves. Other times it's, spending time with your friends or family, whatever might bring you to a comfort place. Now, comfort does not necessarily mean it's actually physically comfortable, because let's say you like to run 20 miles every day in the morning before you start your day. The 20-mile run is not necessarily comfortable or easy for the body, but it's your routine and it's what you do and it's what you know. And if that's the case, then that's your comfort zone. In the stretch zone outside, in the blue area here, is by definition uncomfortable because it's not in the comfort zone. But it's the stretch zone, or sometimes it's called the learning zone, because you're uncomfortable, but you're engaged. You're still engaged. Information is coming in, information is flowing out. And the key here is engagement. Outside of that, you're still uncomfortable, but you're in a panic. So that's the panic zone. And panic zone does not mean you're actually, like shaking and running around panicked, like the cultural associations we have to panic. In the panic zone, we are simply disengaged. We are in fight or flight. In other words, we are feeling so threatened that we're in survival mode. We're just trying to get to the end of whatever it is that's happening. Your comfort zone, your stretch zone, and your panic zone all change in size and shape. Through the course of a day, your comfort zone gets smaller when you're sick or when you're stressed or when you're tired. And in order to make the stretch zone bigger, in order to make the comfort zone bigger, you want to hang out in the stretch zone. The more you stretch, the more you stay curious through something that makes you uncomfortable. The more comfortable you are with discomfort, the more parts of life become the comfort zone. And so the stretch zone is where any learning happens. According to this model, no learning actually happens in comfort zone or panic zone. And in the stretch zone is also where you would want to be dealing with difficult moments when and if you have a chance. Of course, if the difficult moment is there's a high-speed train coming towards you, I don't want you to be in your stretch zone. I want you to be in your panic zone so that you can get out of there. But the key here is to figure out what is a real threat and what is not a real threat, and what are some threats that we perceive as threats but are not real threats. So to add to this model is the compass of shame model. So the compass of shame picks up where the panic zone left off, and it describes the panic zone in more detail. So fight or flight, yes, there's a common experiences of panic zone, and fight self is one kind of fight. So that's about taking that energy of feeling threatened and dissipating it by believing that everything that's wrong in this moment is my fault, is my own fault, which is not always and often not accurate. In the panic zone of fighting others, it means everything I'm feeling right now that's uncomfortable, that's threatening to me, that makes me feel hurt or sad is your fault. I'm going to dissipate this energy of discomfort and I'm going to blame it on you. So fighting others includes blaming someone, includes actual physical aggression. Fighting others also includes retaliation, revenge, spreading rumors about somebody. So in a rejection example, let's use the classic one where, I ask somebody out and they say, no, I'm not interested, or I don't want to, simple rejection. Fight self would be, I am never going to ask anyone else out again because I'm worthless and I deserve nothing. And that this, my life would be alone and so forth. So something that's quite elaborate and takes all of life's woes basically and blame them on myself. Fighting others is a very classic thing that we see actually in the world when people are rejected. So fighting others might include, if you reject me, then I'm going to reject you. I'm going to say, actually, I never actually wanted to ask you out. I was just joking. I was just trying to make fun of you. Or who would want to go out with you? You are terrible in these ways. And often they're stronger words than I'm using. Fight others also includes actual physical retaliation and revenge. So those are some ways. On the bottom here are two kinds of flights. So withdraw is a flight that means I'm going to get out of here. I'm withdrawing from the situation. It's so overwhelming. I'm feeling so threatened by what just happened, by you turning me down, for example. So the person who withdraws might be the person who, if the turn down happened on text, they just never text back again. They don't say, all right, thank you, got it, have a great life. Whereas withdrawing would be walking out or shutting down or completely becoming not present in the situation. That's withdrawing. And avoiding is the kind of flight that means I'm going to pretend as if everything is fine. And avoidance, sometimes it just includes I'm going to busy doing something else so that I don't really pay attention to all this hard emotion that's coming up right now. So in the example where I ask somebody out and they say no, avoidance would be like, oh, that's fantastic because I was really busy anyway. Or I don't engage about the information and I'm just really busy on my phone and I'm not going to pay attention to the actual exchange between us. Let's say we're having a conversation. I zone out of the conversation and I'm just really busy, or suddenly I remember something I have to do. Under avoidance is also all the behaviors that help us numb, so that we don't feel what it is that we are actually feeling. So numbing includes substances that can numb us, includes all kinds of substance dependence kinds of behavior. So things that you can get addicted to are often really easily and commonly employed in order to avoid. So the bottom line is these zones, why am I telling you about it? Because a lot of times when we have trouble dealing with rejection, it's because it sends us into the panic zone. You might think, well, of course it sends us into the panic zone. It should send us into the panic zone. And I'm going to tell you that is not true. It does not have to send us into the panic zone. Do you remember being 3 or 4 and then a friend in the sandbox might, want the same toy as you have. And then when you don't give it, they say, you're a terrible person or you're stupid. That used to hurt a lot as children. That can hurt a lot. It makes sense for it to hurt a lot when we're 3 years old or 4 years old. But if somebody says this to us now, at whatever age you are, the likelihood is that you're able to process that occurrence, that event differently, and that it doesn't devastate you. So it used to send you into your panic zone, and it doesn't send you into your panic zone now. And so that is not a given that rejection of any kind can send you into a panic zone. So how do we stay more in our stretch zone than in our panic zone? That becomes the route to your resilience. I'm going to say that again. Going into the panic zone is human and possible, and in anything really. Returning to the stretch zone so that you respond from the stretch zone is your path to resilience, is your path to feel something. Ultimately, resilience means experiencing something that takes you down, that is a setback, and re-emerging, bouncing back, so to speak. And so that returning back to a stretch zone is the key to your resilience, especially in the face of rejection or other kinds of emotional pain. It's also similar. But before we continue, I want to ask you, if you're in the classroom and doing this as a class, what are ways you witness people specifically fight others or withdraw? when it comes to rejection. So what are the ways you've noticed in your circles, in your friend group, in your school, in your community, and or in the media that you consume, movies, shows, and other ways? What are common ways that we actually witness people fight others and withdraw when it comes to rejection? It's important to be able to discern something as a fight others reaction or a withdrawal reaction. And in fact, to just be able to tell when something happens in the panic zone, because that's actually one of the ways to get out of your panic zone, is to recognize I'm in the panic zone. And to be able to recognize in each other also starts to shift our culture towards an expectation that we don't only react to things in the panic zone. It's really difficult in this moment in time because politically and socially, we see this all over the place. When politicians are debating, they're actually just hurling a lot of attack others at each other, as opposed to actually engaging about issues. So in this period of time, we are really lacking role models who can show us when something sends us into a panic zone and makes us feel threatened, how do we react from a stretch zone? So noticing is important. And specifically, I asked you to notice about fighting others and withdrawing, because these are the two most harmful reactions when it comes to rejection. I mean, a fighting self reaction often is very harmful as well, because it takes people into a place of isolation, of self-blame, of self-harm, and so forth. But many of the violences that we've seen in the world, be that large-scale murders, or homicides of people who are close to the person who is doing the harm, who's feeling rejected, and all kinds of sexual violence also happen in the context of someone feeling rejected first. And then we need to, as a society, actually start to break the cause and effect cycle. The cause is not rejection, and the effect is not violence. It's not so simple. The cause is the inability to process rejection, and the cause of that has to do with a lot of our upbringing, our expectations, especially of masculinity and people who do masculinity, and so forth. And so in order to change those causes, we have to do this work. We have to do emotional work. So for me, some of the things I listed that some of them have already talked about: physical violence, blaming, spreading rumors about somebody, belittling them or mocking them, basically trying to harm them because we believe that through rejecting us, they are harming us. That is the part we have to get right. Through rejecting us, they are not harming us. We feel hurt, but it does not mean they are hurting us on purpose. And many of us were told, don't hurt people's feelings when we were kids. And this is something that also needs to be refined. That message is quite dangerous because often our feelings are hurt. Hurt feelings are not a sign that something is necessarily wrong. It actually is a sign often that we are alive. And just like wonderful, happy, fulfilling feelings are part of the range of normal feelings, hard to feel feelings are also part of that range. Examples of withdrawal that I have down include isolating yourself, shutting down, ghosting, leaving, hanging up. And basically, it's a very all or nothing kind of reaction. And this often happens when people are in relationship and they feel rejected in a small way. And that becomes so overwhelming that they can't deal with it. So immediately they think, I'm leaving. I don't need you. I'm packing my bags. I'm out of here. And then it becomes this, sometimes we just call it drama. But, from my point of view, it really is about a lack of tools to get through that pain so that you can keep processing whatever you're trying to get through together in relationship. How do we get through difficulty in relationship versus that when there is difficulty, we have to completely exit the relationship. So resilience is all those things. Resilience communicates a kind of flexibility, right? A pliability. Talk to any athlete about their muscles, and you'll know that resilient muscles, good muscles, are not just stiff and hard and unyielding. Actually, those are the kinds of muscles um, that are at risk of being torn very easily. And that's why we stretch, that's why we warm up. And so if we can aspire to have our emotional muscles similar to our physical muscles, so that we might flex and bounce back, so that we might take in pain and let it dissipate, versus be so ungiving, unyielding that pain breaks us. So if you want to imagine a kind of pliability for your emotional muscles, that's what we're aiming for. And the person who can be that pliable and strong in the face of emotional pain is the person who will get through it um, and bounce back. And it's something we can all develop. So how do you develop resilience in the face of rejection? There are a few practical, specific ways. One is to do it. One is stuff that you can do. So you have to take risks that bring rejection. And if I would say not to take the biggest risk ever, but keep taking small risks that bring occasions of rejection. A really important and sometimes counterintuitive thing is to feel it, and to name it. To feel rejection when you're rejected is what happens in the stretch zone. All the things that we go into the panic zone about when rejection comes is ways that are trying to take us away. We're trying to not feel rejected. The problem with it is you don't actually get to escape it. You don't get to duck and it flies by and it's over. Rejection that you don't feel accumulates, and it can start to change. It can start to become resentment. It can start to feel like self-hate. It can start to feel like hatred towards other people. It can really dig into your ability to be to feel okay. And so not feeling rejection in the moment or soon after is not a good survival tool. There are better ones that you can develop and that you can keep developing. So feeling it, naming it. So that means if I'm rejected when I ask somebody out, I don't pretend it didn't happen. I don't call it your loss. I don't just react in the panic zone. That I go back to my stretch zone and I say, I was rejected. In my brain, I was rejected. I stay with it. It's uncomfortable. I want it to be different. I wish it was not the case, but I stay with it and it dissipates. That also means that if you are a friend or somebody who's witnessing this rejection, that you call it what it is. Sometimes we expect friends and supportive people to join in on the panic zone of feeling rejected. So I feel rejected. My friend comes and says, oh, they were not worth it. You're so much cooler and better than them. I'm so glad it actually that it didn't happen because, they are terrible. They're scum. They are nothing compared to you. So putting down the thing that I wanted in order to make me feel better, sometimes we see that as being a very supportive, friendly thing to do. It is ultimately not good for my ability to be resilient. So how do we do that? To be a good friend, we name the rejection. I'm sorry you were rejected. I feel sad that you were rejected. I love you. I care for you. You're amazing in my eyes. And this goes for any kind of rejection, right? This goes for being rejected by um, a school that you want to get into. It includes being rejected by friends, by a team you want to get on, all kinds of rejection. So if you call it what it is, then we can deal with it. If you don't call it what it is, then we start to accumulate unprocessed rejection feelings. And then the other piece we need to do is to care for emotional pain. And this I speak to everyone of all genders, but I want to especially acknowledge that one of the practices that are so awful about masculinity, one of the things that masculinity imposes on people who are supposed to be masculine, is this lack of care. That you're supposed to get used to dealing with pain yourself, to disappear the pain, to not talk about pain, and or to not feel pain. Unfortunately, none of those things are possible unless you're not human. And if you're human, then you are a creature that experiences pain, and your pain actually requires and deserves care and attention. And those are truths that sometimes are taken away, I think we lie to people about it a lot of times when we tell people to just, buck up and feel better and not to wallow, and because it's so pathetic and so forth. So as a society, we go into a panic zone to see someone in pain, especially if that person is supposed to be masculine. So let's all turn the table on masculinity. This is not about men being problematic. This is about what masculinity imposes onto some of us, this belief that we don't get care. And so if you feel rejected, if you feel emotional pain, how do you actually ask for and receive the care? That actually takes a lot of skill, and that takes practice. It's not just a decision that, oh yeah, I want to receive care, sure. Because if you haven't received care most of your life, the moment you decide to receive care is only the first step to actually having the care penetrate deep enough to feel something. But it is worthwhile. It is worthwhile to even attempt and experiment with what it's like to receive and feel cared for, which means that the people who are supportive of us, the people who are our friends, our family, need to offer care. So when somebody is in emotional pain, it might make you feel panicked. It might make you feel uncomfortable. And if we are to shift as a culture, then all of us have to shift. Stay with that. Stay with that person. Sometimes people go really quickly to cheering things up or trying to say, get out there and try again. Sometimes it's premature. So the empathy that you can offer is really needed in that moment. What you need to do is actually to offer a recognition that there is pain, and then some kind of support for the pain, not some kind of escape from the pain. Sometimes we need distractions, for sure. We can't just feel all the pain all the time. That would be excruciating. But don't neglect offering actual care for someone's pain. And that could just mean a hand on the shoulder. You don't have to say much sometimes. It could mean sitting with somebody. It could mean I'm saying, I'm sorry, man, and I care about you, and I got you. Those are kinds of things you can offer, and it might send you into your panic zone. So notice that, oh my God, my friend is in pain, and it sends me into my panic zone. I'm going to go back into my stretch zone so that I can be supportive. So those are all things that you can do. Some things you can know include, especially when it comes to sexual and romantic rejection, is that it's expected. It's expected. No matter what has been sold to us, has been told to us, has been promised, or what other people's Instagram shows how wonderfully successful they are, the truth is all of us feel rejected and alone at quite a high frequency. So expect it. It is not a sign that the world is falling apart. It might feel that way. But that feeling will change if you can stay with it. And the other thing you can know is that we talk about sexual compatibility or relational compatibility as if it's merit-based. So as if it means if you're good enough, if you're smart enough, if you're beautiful enough, if you're hot or rich or accomplished or buff or anything enough, if you're good enough, if you're kind enough, if you're nice enough, that it will happen, that it's based on the merit of these things that you can measure. But the truth is, it's not. Many of us who've been in relationship with people who are not our type, or who are surprises to us, know that it actually, compatibility is exactly that. It's about compatibility. It's a relational thing. It happens between two people. It's not like if you're a 10, then everyone wants you. That is a terrible mythology, and it's wrong. And so we have to stop believing that, because when we believe it and then we're rejected, then we believe there's something wrong with us, right? So if it's merit-based and we're rejected, we believe we don't have enough merit. When we know that it's relational, it's about a compatibility, it's about how two people may fit together, the chemistry between them, then it's not something necessarily wrong with you. I mean, there could be something wrong with you, and that's something else we can talk about. But the truth is, when someone rejects you or says no, they're saying whatever between us is not the kind of thing I want between us. So then what we do is we need to accept that is terrible news. It's terrible news. It feels terribly disappointing, and we can name all those things. But at least we don't have to fight them on our merit. We don't have to fight for our sense of worth in that moment. All we need is to acknowledge that this really sucks and I wish it was different. And finally, to build resilience, one of the most practical things you can do is to have an exit plan. So that means when you're rejected, not if you're rejected, but when you're rejected. If you're in friendship, in relationship, you will be rejected. There will be times when you feel rejected, when you're not the first choice to be somebody's best man or their, what do you call it? The bridesmaid. When you are, not tagged in as many photos as somebody else's, when you don't get as many likes. All those things are little moments of rejection. And so when you're rejected, what do you want to do? Have an exit plan. What are your values in life? And how do you have an exit plan that matches those values, right? So who are you going to talk to? Who are the people who you could say something like, I feel really bad about this thing that happened, and they're not going to further punish you for it. To know that. What are the things that get you back into your stretch zone? Is it writing? Is it playing music? Is it listening to a certain song? Is it going for a walk? Is it doing a certain sport? Is it sweating? Is it working out? Whatever it might be, have a plan, have multiple plans, so that when rejection happens, you're not at a loss and you don't feel completely stranded alone in the panic zone. You have some sense of what you're going to do when you feel that awful empty stomach in your stomach, empty feeling in your stomach. So that's the exit plan. One of the things that are most important for the practice of building your rejection, of course, is investing in your courage. Courage is one of the things that we have within us. Nothing can give you courage. And the research on courage actually specifically says that the only way to increase your courage is to name, acknowledge, and know when you're being courageous. So every time you're courageous, don't waste the opportunity to increase that courage some more by recognizing it. So if you're in a class, this is the point where you pause and think about this question. And I encourage you to do this in pairs. For 2 minutes, tell the person in the pair something that you've done that is courageous. Just tell them in a couple minutes what it was, how did you do it, what was the outcome. So you can pause that now. And the next question I want to ask you is, what did it feel like in the doing of the courageous thing? What did it feel like to be courageous? Think of the moment just before courage happened. And the most common answers I get when I ask that question is uncertainty, fear, regret. Almost like immediately you decide to be courageous, you might have equal amount of regret already in the back of your mind. Worry, feeling alone, feeling relieved, feeling aligned with my values, therefore I'm proud of myself, feeling happy, feeling set free. It's kind of a given that courageous things almost it only happens with you not knowing the outcome. So sometimes courageous acts lead to ideal outcomes, and sometimes they bring us to outcomes that we really don't want. So that is not a guarantee of courage. We know that. And courage finally is just sort of a mix of that stir in your stomach, makes you, some of us want to like throw up, and also poop in our pants at the same time, as all those good feelings that might come with relief and happiness and proud of yourself. So those are what I like to call the anatomy of courage. Those are what feeling courageous feels like. Feeling courageous and being courageous does not feel like you're a knight on a horse with a big piercing weapon of some kind. It's not gallant at all. It's a terrifying, messy situation. So recognize that, know that, so that next time you are courageous, you're even better at recognizing it. And it'll add to your ability to be resilient, because courage is the thing that brings you into a situation that might get you rejected in the first place. Asking somebody out, asking for a divorce, saying, I'd really like for you to meet my family. All those things of invitation, of asking for something I want. And courage is also what will help you through rejection, because it requires a lot of courage to go into your stretch zone instead of staying in your panic zone. And finally, the last point I have for today is a bigger practice of calibrating our sense of threat. How do we calibrate so that we're accurate in sensing whether something is threatening to us or not? I want you to, I'm going to put a link in this video setup to a video that I made. It's called Bluefish. And it's about basically the ghosts that are in our heads, the things that filter what we see, what's coming in, filter it so that we actually don't see accurately. Filter not in a good way, filter in a skewing way. So Bluefish, have a watch. It's 2.5 minutes, and it's a true story. And if you're in class, please think about this question. What are your bluefish when it comes to rejection? What are you equating with rejection that are not true or real? What threat do you sense that isn't real? And what would your future ideal aspirational self, the wiser self, you as a sage in the future, what would that self tell you about rejection and the ways that you're afraid of rejection right now? What kind of wisdom would they share with you? So that's my final question to you. And I want to apply it to the poem I told you about that I wrote in grade 11. You know, a lot of the things I assumed would kill me, basically, if somebody found out that I liked them and they didn't like me back. Or the shame of being, found out for being gay when somebody isn't gay as well. My future wiser self, which is now, wants to tell the younger self, those things actually change a lot. And They're not that scary. And one day, imagine, believe it or not, you will actually not be afraid of either of those things. And I'm with you, and I send you love. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to have a quick scan of the comments, and feel free to jump in and say stuff if you'd like. I see some comments. Thank you for sharing your experiences of rejection, and there is the link in the comment section for Bluefish. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions right now, please throw them up. I'll be here for a few more minutes to talk with you about it. Oh, I forgot to say, you can find my work at fluidexchange.org. That's fluidexchange.org. Most of the time I busy myself with doing trainings and education kinds of activities. Thank you for joining me. And I think we will pause there if there are no questions coming. Thanks again, Lisa and Sarah, for your comments and for sharing. Okay, I'll pause there. Have a great day, everyone. And I'm rooting for you.